Hello out there. Max here, co-founder and chief growth officer at Influx Marketing. And today we're at the Aesthetic Society meeting here at the Miami Beach Convention Center. This is the annual meeting of the American Society for Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. Every year I walk the aisles and I end up spending most of my time chatting with industry peers and marketing-minded physicians, and I always walk away really feeling like I have my finger on the pulse of what's happening in our space. So this year, I thought it would be fun to take it a step further and have those same discussions that I always find myself having, but do it in a podcast format so that I can bring them to you at home. So if you're like me and you want to be dialed in on what's happening within the world of patient acquisition and digital marketing for aesthetic practices, follow along, and I hope to bring you some valuable insights through these conversations that you can use to take your practice to the next level. Can't take myself seriously. All right, let's roll with it. All right, we're back, and I'm now joined by Dr. Stephan Baker, who's practicing here in Miami, Florida. He also happens to be a client of Influx. And Dr. Baker, thank you so much for joining us here today.
My pleasure.
So we're right in your backyard.
They sure are.
But it's not where you're originally from,
No,
Miami.
I grew up in Germany, in the western part of Germany, before the wall fell, in Frankfurt am Main, Germany.
Wow, and then you came to Miami by way of Manhattan.
Well, I came to college. I was adopted by an American, gave me the opportunity to come to America, so I tried out American college life for a year. 1 year became 2, then 4, then applied to medical schools, ended up in NYU in New York, did my medical training there, and then spent 5 years in general surgery. And then that took me till 1989, and then I came to Miami for plastic surgery residency with Dr. Millard. So after I was here for about 6 months, I started liking the environment more than any place else I've ever lived. And I'm still here. So
And here we are.
years later, 30 plus years later.
And I'm guessing Miami's changed a little bit since then.
Extremely, I would say. I mean, 89, it was kind of like a small town. On Miami Beach, there was really nothing going on. I mean, the whole Ocean Drive thing was one-lane road. News Cafe was already there. But other than that, it was just a quiet place, nothing happening. You didn't even know you were on South Beach. Nobody would know that South Beach became South Beach later on.
Yeah.
So it was just a beautiful place, beautiful beaches. And, in the early 90s, we had the modeling industry down here. So Europeans, Germans, Italians, French, they were shooting down here. Gianni Versace moved here in 1990, built the Versace Palace. That brought a lot of people down here. And then, Miami just started growing. Lots of New Yorkers. I mean, when I was out here about on Miami Beach, I would constantly run into people I knew in Manhattan.
Oh, really?
So, restaurateurs, clubs, and all those kind of, there was just a ton of people coming from New York. It was a beautiful place.
It is. It is. And there's been a whole new wave of growth.
It's just tremendous growth in the real estate market. Now we have big finance move to, South Florida. They all live on Miami Beach. I mean, billionaires, really wealthy financial companies. That brings a whole slew of attorneys down here, big attorney companies, because, they all need attorney services. So one thing leads to another.
We got tech happening, big time.
Tech is coming. I mean, everybody's here, and everybody's, we got the Grand Prix now. I mean, it's right. The F1, that's already a big statement,
No kidding.
So lots of things going on.
Okay, so this is your town now, has been for some time.
Yeah, I know pretty darn well, yeah.
You're practicing here. Will you tell us a little bit about your practice, your focus?
Well, it's been for probably 30 years now, aesthetic surgery. My main things are facelifting surgeries. I do a lot of also, rejuvenation type surgery for after pregnancy, so tummy tucks and breast lifts, breast reductions. Those are my principal things that I do.
Excellent.
Yep.
So, as you know, and as we discussed a little before you came here, this podcast is about marketing.
Sure.
And digital marketing.
Yep.
But marketing wasn't always digital.
Nope.
And being as you set up practice here in 1989, I'm sure you remember a time when marketing wasn't digital. I love to pick the brain. I would love to pick your brain as a surgeon, as a person who's on the ground, seeing these changes in the marketing world.
Well, I think the big change has really been social media. Prior to 2005, marketing was, the usual marketing. I mean, you'd see billboards on the highways, you'd see newspapers, magazines, etc. But, once you got the social media, which makes marketing available to anybody who has a cell phone, things kind of exploded. And if you just scroll through Instagram or Facebook, any of those platforms, you'll see non-stop plastic surgery, which just lends itself. It's a visual medium. There's a lot of interest, especially, in places like Miami, I'm sure, West Coast, New York, and all those kind of places. So marketing prior to social media was probably, was always kind of like an important thing, but it wasn't an essential thing. So my marketing efforts really didn't start until social media came about, even probably more later than that, because fundamentally, as a physician, I'm against marketing. That's just never sat straight with me. I think you do good work and patients talk. A referral of word of mouth, I think to this day is the best referral. Most of my facelift, patients, they talk. It's a certain group of people that do that type of surgery, and one person has a good experience, safe experience, and they tell somebody else, and they tell somebody else, and that's kind of how it works. But if you ignore the internet marketing, the social media marketing, you don't get on. You have to be out there. You have to exist in the internet. So unfortunately, it's really not an option anymore. But it's really sort of an essential part of of conducting the business side of your practice.
Absolutely. I think what you just touched upon, obviously things are different today, but I've been around a little while, and I remember when I first, a little more than a decade ago, started doing aesthetic marketing, there were internal struggles and debates from surgeons about, is this ethical? Should I be marketing? I should just find, you're right. There's no better marketing than word of mouth, and there's no better patient than you'll get from the one from word of mouth.
Yeah.
But many surgeons, and I think this is kind of what you're getting at, have been sort of pushed into marketing because everyone around them is doing it. And at a certain point, unfortunately, the consumer maybe doesn't understand the nuances.
It's incredibly confusing for patients.
Right.
So, as prospective patient, there's so much information out there, and so much information is confusing, especially if you don't have a medical background. How do you... It's like that for other industries too. How do you find a competent lawyer? How do you find a competent financial advisor? It's unless you're in the industry, you don't really know what questions to ask. So it's all pretty darn scary for patients. And but you have to have a presence in that space so that people can access you. If you're just hiding in your office, nobody knows you exist. That's not enough. And it used to be different, in the past, because the numbers of people doing this type of surgery was a lot smaller. Now you have plastic surgeons, you have ENT surgeons, you have cosmetic surgeons. You have all kinds of people that are in this market space. So it's really important to have a presence and a differentiation. But what's very important to remember is that you got to produce the result. You can't just tell everybody how wonderful you are and how great you are. If you can't produce the result, you can't produce a happy patient. And marketing sooner or later will have its downfall too.
It can't solve those problems.
Yeah, you got to do this. You got to know what you're doing and get the job done. Because at the end of the day, the patient wants you to do a job for them. And if you do it well, then you'll thrive long term. And if you don't, well, that's the other side of social media. If you don't do well, there's a real backlash.
It's a double-edged sword, no question.
Totally.
So when you first set up practice, how would you acquire patients?
Initially, just what I call the good old-fashioned way. I just ran initially to 10 different emergency rooms. So I just saw a lot of trauma patients, hand patients.
Okay, yeah.
And I spread my name by doing good work on those patients. I got known in the emergency rooms, and patients started referring. Okay, I saw this guy do this. So it's sort of like a very organic growth kind of thing. It's not a fast growth. Today I think doctors try to jump into this space and immediately get some fancy name for internet marketing, and then they're Dr. So and so and Dr. this, and it's sort of like, I guess, the new way maybe to procure patients. It's certainly not what my mentors did. My mentor Millard was vehemently against marketing. He said it's marketing is turns the bum into a hero, but he's still a bum. So I kind of grew up under that influence. So I was very close-minded about marketing, but I was a different generation. So you have to adjust with the times, and obviously like I said, social media has just changed so much in so many industries.
Yes,
and you can't even imagine the market without it these days.
Nope.
Yeah.
So that was a reconstructive practice you were building, running around to ERs. Were you able to build an aesthetic practice kind of out of it?
Well, that comes gradually. So patients know you did a good job, with putting that finger back together, fixing that tendon injury, putting that facial fracture together, et cetera, et cetera. So then they say, well, I know this guy. And then, patients start looking for you. I said, this guy has certain competence, he has training, and then they come in for cosmetics things. So that was a very slow organic growth, but a very solid growth. And, it's reputation building. Back then we didn't have a reputation management and and all that stuff.
In the same sense.
You had to build it, from ground up. So things today, a much faster pace.
Yeah.
and everything sort of quote managed. So different worlds.
Different world. So speaking of a different world, when when social media sort of ushered in a new generation or a new paradigm, what was the first thing you did when you finally embraced marketing?
Well, I mean, I asked around. I looked around what other people were doing.
Okay.
So, you have to always sort of benchmark yourself against, competitors. Everybody has competitors. And, I was sort of hesitant. I'm still not a huge fan of social media, frankly, because there's just so much, confusing. Let's call it confusing and not disinformation or misinformation.
Okay, I got what you're getting at. Yeah.
I mean, everything's sort of glamorized and sensationalized, and so I just have a lot of hard time with a lot of those things because, end of the day, I'm a total patient advocate. I mean, I will not do something unless I believe it benefits the patient. Like I said, I call that old school. So
shouldn't be old school. Hopefully, it's not old school.
That's what I think. I mean, I think if you're the patient at some point, you want to make sure that the doctor has your best interest at heart, not adding 10,000 procedures on top of whatever else and doing things they don't need, or operating on a patient that shouldn't have surgery. So there's a lot of conflict that I have with those things that I see in the industry. But again, you have to adapt.
Okay, so you adapted and you have a flourishing practice, but without having to really be fully committed to social media. It sounds like you there's a bare minimum we have to keep.
That's true.
But it sounds like you're not all in on it, clearly.
No. I mean, what we do with social media is basically put a before and after.
Right. And it's helpful if I feel like it's somewhere in the patient acquisition journey, they vet your authenticity through going through social media. So you need something.
Yeah, you have to be there. If you don't exist, you don't exist.
You don't exist, you don't exist.
So it sounds silly, but it's
true.
True, But all this, this sort of, romancing the patient and trying to be social with the patient, getting them to like you. And, I think that's just, there has to be a boundary between professional, things and personal stress. And, I don't want the patient to be my best friend and like, vice versa. I mean, you want to have a good rapport with your course, but you got to get the job done.
You're working for their result, for their best outcome.
So much of the social media, what I see in the videos is just like, schmoozing up to the patient and, like, it's like, come on, it's not professional.
I understand.
I mean, that's how I think.
I understand. So, but I think there's a lesson here because we talk a lot about how you don't have to have an absolutely, a social media presence to the level that some of these people have in order to have a very successful practice.
Yeah.
That may change, but as of now, you can do very well with minimal social media presence. And I think that's kind of a key takeaway here.
I think so too. Yeah. I mean, but again, like I said, I have a lot of patient referrals through other patients. But they will tell you that they saw your photos on Instagram.
Yeah.
So they look. Everybody looks. So you have to be there. And I think it's a very appropriate thing to show your work.
It is appropriate. Yeah.
I mean, with certain things blocked out sometimes, of course, be discreet.
Of course.
But I think that's important. Patients want to see results.
That's right. You got to be there to be there, and if you don't exist, you don't exist.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's true.
So before we wrap up here, this is the kind of final thing I want to ask you is if there's other surgeons that are in your shoes, maybe not so sure about marketing in this way, or embracing it. I know we're well into the social media era. I'm curious what's coming next because it's all about to change, I feel like, again.
Well, change never stops.
Change is a constant.
That's life.
So do you have any advice you would give to surgeons that maybe had a wall up a little bit about this and are kind of embrace?
I think the big advice I would say is stay professional.
Okay.
Be professional.
Okay.
Be ethical.
Yeah.
Get good at what you're doing because at the end of the day, that's what matters. You got to get good at certain surgeries. You can't be good at every surgery, but be good at the surgeries that you are offering. And give your best to that patient and do the patient right. Don't do things that the patients don't need because you make more money on it. Tell patients that shouldn't have surgery that they shouldn't have surgery, and just be their advocate. You don't have to be their friend, but you need to be their professional advocate. And I think that's part of the mantra of being a physician. So I always think of being a physician first, plastic surgeon always second. Shouldn't be the other way around.
It's very sage advice. And a very patient-centered approach, which is how it should be.
It's worked.
It's worked.
Yeah, and I'm very happy. I feel great about my practice, and I sleep well.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and sharing your time with us. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Appreciate it.
We should do it again sometime.
Pleasure.
Thank you again.
Okay.